let's continue here so we can finish on time and we have a few minutes to answer questions or have a few discussions there. So sometimes we could say, oh, these are negative things, but I try to be very specific in terms of what's wrong with these perceptions. The next ones, I call them self-defeating perceptions. In other words, these perceptions, they don't help us. If we are trying to improve, we're trying to be strong, if we're trying to do something else, they take away from it. They are not necessarily a negative thing themselves. For example, the light green, which is not the lime green, the light green, the brain picks that to register that there were some incidences where this person felt really rejected. Now, most people who reject others, they don't say, I am rejecting you. It's how they relate to you that tells you they're rejecting you. And I was telling you about this whole apartheid system of governing that I grew up under. It was a well-known thing, actually. The Prime Minister of Zimbabwe back then was called Rhodesia. Ian Smith used to say during his lifetime, there is no way the black people in Zimbabwe would ever be the government or included in society because they were, or I should say, we were just a little above monkeys and baboons. The only difference that we didn't have tails. Okay. So that perception, if you really, really believe it, you are not going to think that you can rise above anything. Okay. So the light green, the people with the light green, if they heard that, they would believe it and say, I'm totally rejected, not just by this government or by this group of people, but everyone else is going to reject me. Therefore, I don't deserve to be accepted or loved. There are no human beings that I'm aware of who thrive on rejection. That's very hurtful to us. We don't want to be rejected. We want to be embraced. So when lime green is number one on the sensory motor cortex, on the relational part of the brain, we will talk about this in another class. That means that perception is that, okay, I know I don't stand a chance. I'm just going to be rejected, I know. And therefore, the behaviors and what I do is going to be ordered by that belief, the conclusion. So if people invite me to a party, immediately, if I'm in lime green sensory motor cortex, I'm not going. Because I know if I go there, no one is going to talk to me, no one is going to accept me, and all night or whatever time of the day it is, I'm going to be miserable, therefore I'm not going. Or if I end up going, if somebody walks by me and doesn't say hi, I register, okay, they just are wondering why I'm here, I shouldn't be here. They cannot see me. Okay. One of the problems with the lime green is that when we are in relationships and functioning with the assumption that I'm rejected, everything that happens in that friendship, in that relationship, is going to be seen as, oh, there we go again, I'm rejected. If someone says, they ask him, hey, can you help me with this? And the person says, oh, I'm sorry, I have to run. Like, most of us have seen this. You go into the grocery store or someplace else, you see those people, little kids, selling Girl Scout cookies. And they say, well, can you buy this? Some of us just no thanks and keep going. Some people don't even look there, they just go. And have you even wondered what those kids are thinking? Now, if that kid is not having rejection, they're just going to think something like, oh, well, they don't want to buy, or they don't have money, or they're just not nice, or they don't like, they won't say, oh boy, I'm so terrible, that's why they don't want to buy my cookies. So that's the light green perception in number one. In number two, it's very personal now. It's not just that in these interactions with people, but even I myself believe that I am not a person who should be loved. I deserve to be rejected. I was talking to somebody today who actually said she's convinced that every wrong thing, every accusation her family piled on her was so correct. And I'm going like, you mean even the abuse from your dad and the abuse from your brother? I said, yeah, I deserved it. How do you deserve this? Oh, I just know I do. And looking at the map, that's what we saw there on number two. So one of the reasons why this is so that for us, we can be sensitive to what's in my brain that I didn't even know was there. Because these are not very conscious things, by the way. These are subconscious things because our brains do not forget the things that we go through. They just store it. And so it's up to us to see when we see it, we're going like, well, I'm going to do something about it. And by the way, these classes are not just giving you information. There's going to come a time when we are going to do some practical application to this. And I have ways to do it that are less boring and more unique to each person. And we'll get to, I'll tell you ahead of time when we're doing that, because it takes a lot of preparation at home to do those things. Okay. Now, the other one is pink. Now, pink is not a negative color at all. We all have pink. Why? Because we all have human emotions. Human emotions are healthy. We need them. If we didn't have them, we would not be able to enjoy anything. But those emotions are meant to do certain functions, and there is a rightful place in our brain for our emotions. 1, 2, 3 is not one of those places where our emotions are helpful. Why? Because if we have emotions at number one, that means our perception of the outside world is going to be emotionally based. Why is that a problem? One, we will get very overwhelmed if we feel like something is off. See, feelings don't always tell us the truth because they change. You don't want to always relate emotionally because you're going to be disappointed many, many times because your emotions are going to change. You may feel a certain way in the morning, by the evening you're feeling totally different. So if you were building everything on your feelings, this is what happens. One of the things that in the chapter that we were reading, towards the very end of that chapter, I talk about certain faiths, certain churches, certain denominations, certain traditions that build their whole doctrine of what to believe about God based on feelings and emotions. Now, there's a song that we sing here, written by Cody Carnes. Actually, we sang it a couple weeks ago, I remember. Part of the words is that I won't be formed by feelings, but I'll hold firm to what is true. Well, why? What is he talking about? He's talking about he was very aware that there are certain faiths and certain traditions where your doctrine is based on your experience, so how you feel determines that's truth. A very dangerous thing to do because that is not true. Feelings change. I was talking about how when we were kids, they asked us, what do you want to be when you grow up? If you saw a teacher that seemed cool to you, you would say, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. It's just all these emotions. But later on, when you mature, you are not governed by emotions. You begin to think, well, what am I good at? Or what is it that I really like to do that I think is worthwhile doing? Now you are choosing based on reason, not on emotions. So, and the other thing about the pink, the emotions, why we don't want it in those areas, pink usually comes from the emotions we had growing up, and we're not kids anymore. So we don't want to be ruled by the things that ruled us when we were kids. One of the things that I've seen with pink in 1, 2, 3 is a lot of my clients, especially children, if they have a sensory processing disorder, what that is they cannot manage emotions. The problem, I find it then 1, 2, 3. Okay. Here are some examples that some of you who are teachers, you probably have seen this with your students. One student cannot handle noises. In the classroom, if there's noises, they don't. Sometimes they go like this because their sense of hearing is totally overwhelmed, cannot take in noises. In other words, that part of their brain, is underdeveloped, it cannot. One of the examples that I used when I was teaching at the university is I would take a small bottle like this and a big one in one hand, and I open this and then say, I'm going to pour all this water into this little bottle. And what happens is it just overflows because this cannot take it. And I say, that's an example of when people have sensitivities. It's not just noise, sometimes it's sight. That they don't, if there's too much to see. I remember walking into a classroom in Dallas years ago. I went to do a consultation in this school that was having a lot of immigrants from Sudan, and they were having problems with their students. And so then I walked around trying to see how they could improve the experience of these students. And I realized that teachers, they have things in the classroom, pictures everywhere. Some of the pictures the kids do, but they put this. And I looked at it. Several of those pictures had policemen, army trucks, fire engines, and those things. And I looked, and I remember saying to the staff, and I said, your Sudanese students cannot handle this. They went, well, I mean, this is, and I said, you don't know where they come from. Police, soldiers in Sudan during the war, they were not a sign of peace or protection. That's who come in to kill your parents while you're watching. So this does not hit them the same way it hits your students. One said, yeah, and I said, you'll be surprised. Try to have them in a classroom without all this and see if they're going to do the same thing, saw a change. So one of the important things about this area is really to know that these sensitivities that we're talking about here is how that child is going to perceive everything. That's why they struggle so much, because the glasses they are wearing, which they cannot take off, is showing them things that are not exactly the way they are there, but the way they are in their brain. Then the last one in this is a red violet. I did talk about red violet last time, but here, the red violet, that perception is based on the craving inside of this child that they need to be loved and nurtured by their mother, almost excessively. Many times it may come from having grown up with a mom for whatever reason, was very distant and couldn't nurture. Kind of what happens in mothers who clinically depressed. They don't have it in them to be able to give emotionally to the child. Or sometimes the opposite of it, either is a child who the mom, for whatever reason, latched on to this child, and there was this over dependence with the child to where the child now doesn't want to miss this, wants this forever. So the red violet there, when it's in number 3, there is no growing. There is no, I am going to do this in the future. But it's red violet is number 3. That means, you know, I will always want my mom to do this for me because I cannot do it. Okay. And on number 2, when red violet is number 2, personally, the person does not see themselves as capable of functioning outside this nurturing environment. What we have seen with this is someone goes to a job, you know, working at a place. They expect to be mothered, they expect to be cuddled, they expect to be spoiled. When that doesn't happen, they are devastated. And so that's why when we talk about Asperger's or on the spectrum, we have to pay attention to, they have certain needs that the cure for this, or I should say the treatment for this, is not medicine. Sometimes the medication would help with some of the symptoms, but the real treatment for this is to help those parts of the brain learn to do things differently. And when we start talking about the application, I will show you exactly what we mean by that. Okay, now we go to the last section, which I call this protective perceptions. Now, on section 1 that we started with a healthy perception of the world, the purple and blue are also very protective perceptions, but they are protective perceptions in a very positive way. But the protective perceptions on D, they can be both negative or positive. Let's go with positive first. Brown is a protection whether it's in 1 or 2 or 3. So the brown protection is the thinking that in the world you might have people that cause you emotional pain. So Brown says don't allow that. You need to be tough. When you're tough, nothing will happen. The reason why Brown usually is born in the brain is if they're in the brain, they are what I call vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are not always a bad thing. It just means openness and sensitivity. When those openness and sensitivities in the brain, the Brown is saying, okay, we better watch it because we don't want you to get hurt. So Brown comes and says, I'm going to defend you. So that's the positive side. The negative side of Brown is when Brown is overly protective to where it doesn't allow anything. Typically when Brown is in number 1 and you're talking about us men and we are married, we're in a relationship, when Brown is number 1, Brown assumes that she might cause you pain, therefore you need to put the wall, make sure it doesn't go past. And so usually when a guy has Brown in there, when the wife comes to me and says, I cannot reach him, it doesn't matter what I do, I mean, it's like just going against the wall. And they may think, oh, he's just mean, but really what it is Brown is saying, no, I'm not so sure if you won't hurt him. And that's where Brown is there to try to protect in the overprotectiveness. The overprotectiveness, the problem with it is it seems to cripple a person's ability to be open and be able to do other things that they may need to be able to do. The other protection that can be either negative or positive is peach or apricot. See, this is when it's number 1, peach is the way we all are able to hold things together in our life when there's a threat of things disintegrating or falling apart. The ability to hold it together is very necessary, especially when things are tough. That is the positive side of the peach or apricot. The negative side of that color is when peach sees there are a lot of problems, but peach does not want you look at them. So peach becomes a facade that says everything is fine when it's not fine at all. That's the negative side of peach or apricot. So for me, when I see peach, depending upon when I see it, if I see it in the perception area of 1, 2, 3, I don't come up and says, well, what's happening here? Because I assume there is a threat of things falling apart. So peach is going like, we have to hold this together, whether it's relating, whether it's self-perception, whether it's the future. That I assume it's a positive thing until I begin to see some of the negativities, so we can start saying, okay, we need to change this, because what you don't want to do, what we don't want to do is remove this perception when the person does not have a different way to manage this. So that's the thing. So the black, the only positive side of the black is that the black is trying to stop the bad things that happened before. But the way black tries to do this is the problem. Either black says, I'm going to lash out, or the black says, I'm going to be very negative, I don't trust anything, I'm going to think the world is a horrible place. Like one of those, the story of Adolphus, one of the things, what happened to Adolphus is his girlfriend got pregnant. And he panicked. And when he was talking to me, the panic for him was, oh no, no one should ever bring an innocent life into this horrible world. And it's because of what happened to him. And I'm going like, you know what? Some of us are glad that we were brought into this world, because it's not all bad, but he couldn't see. Black can't see anything positive, only sees negative all the time. When I see faces on those two openings, I know that they're going like, hey, we need our tables to change. So we stop here.